Hello and welcome to this week's Villa View with me, Bill Howell. In a moment, we'll be hearing from Matt Kendrick in our match in a minute. First of all, some of my own reflections on that home defeat to Chelsea, which ended a very, very proud run indeed. 13 games unbeaten in the Premier League for Aston Villa, which started way back against Middlesbrough at Villa Park, and we saw some terrific games en route. In the end, Chelsea too strong. Villa created some good chances, but Gabi Agbonlahor couldn't beat Petr Cech. And still, 6 points clear of Arsenal. That's the thing that Villa fans really do have to cling on to now, ahead of two very, very tricky Premier League games against Stoke City and Manchester City the following Wednesday. Now we're hearing from Matt Kendrick in our match in a minute.
So the 14-game run comes to an end, and it's a sign of the progress Villa have made in recent months that it feels like disappointment, even though they're still in fourth place in the Premier League. It's one of those days, I'm afraid, for Villa. Martin O'Neill has just told us that his players were a bit leggy after 3 games in 6 days, and I think you could see that at times in the first half, when Chelsea did threaten to outclass Villa and took a lead with a wonderfully created goal and a wonderfully finished goal, with Frank Lampard splitting Curtis Davies and Stilian Petrov, and Nicholas Anelka dinking the ball over Brad Friedel. Villa did try and get back into it. Ashley Young thundered a free kick against the underside of the bar, which bounced to safety, and Gabi Agbonlahor and Gareth Barry both had efforts which brought the best out of Petr Cech. But ultimately it was one of those days, I'm afraid, and Villa must regroup in time for another big game in Moscow on Wednesday, and then return for what Martin O'Neill admits is the Holy Grail, the Premier League against Stoke next Sunday.
Okay, thanks very much, Matt. Very incisive indeed. So, where do we go? Difficult game ahead on Thursday for Villa. I suppose we're all asking the question as to what sort of a team Martin O'Neill will put out, whether he will go with a reserve side or a bit of a mixture. You would have to probably guess that Brad Guzan will come in, and Nicky Shorey, Steve Sidwell, John Carew, possibly Nathan Delfonso. Or does he go the whole hog and play Mustafa Salifu? It's a really difficult one, and you know that Martin O'Neill will be juggling these thoughts in his head at this point. It was a really difficult game against Chelsea, and one where Villa played okay. They were much better than they were in the FA Cup against Everton. Perhaps didn't have quite the rhythm going against CSKA Moscow. But as I say, they had chances in the game, although Brad Friedel produced 3 blinding saves of his own to keep Chelsea at bay. But Villa's crowd were up for that game. It was a terrific atmosphere. There really is a feel-good factor around the club at the moment. You could sense that. And certainly Martin O'Neill is aware of the part that the fans are playing at the moment. These are his reflections on the game.
I think sometimes that you can read an incredible amount into a game just because of the eventual result. I don't see it. I see it as a setback, as a disappointment. There is absolutely no dent in belief. I'm not coming across here to give you a message that's totally different in the dressing room. Absolutely not. No dent whatsoever. We thought, I would hardly use the word expect because you can't expect anything in this game, but we thought we could win today. At half-time, we thought we could win as well too. And I thought that the players, again, in terms of effort and determination, have given what they've been given here for quite some considerable time. So we got beaten in the game. Couldn't turn it around towards the end. There'll be another day, and we are still in there fighting.
Those are the thoughts of Martin O'Neill immediately after the game there. Villa now have to prepare for this game against Moscow on Thursday, when they're flying out tomorrow to the Russian capital to play on the plastic pitch. It's going to be a difficult game. No one is under any illusion about the size of the challenge there. We've had some very interesting emails come in from Villa supporters. Again, it's this question of exactly what sort of a side Martin O'Neill should put out. If you remember, it was a reserve side that played in Hamburg and got beaten quite heavily that night, which led to Villa having to play CSKA Moscow rather than having a slightly easier tie. Anyway, here, 1-1 the tie stands, and one or two thoughts here from fans. This is from Harry. He said, I'd go and send the kids. He'd save as many players as possible for that game against Stoke City on Sunday. He says, we simply do not have the squad to compete in the Premier League and the UEFA Cup together, and we will not win the UEFA Cup anyway. Those strong thoughts from him. Surely Aston Villa have been playing since July to try and get into this position, and surely they can't do a Bolton, if you like, and throw the tie away just like that. If you remember, Gary Megson fielded a complete second string at Sporting Lisbon last year. This is from a fellow who calls himself Chuck Villa. He says, O'Neill is talking and making changes for the return leg in Russia. So it's time for the fringe players to step up to the plate. He says he's right. We have to qualify for the Champions League to move forward. So concentrating on the Premiership is our main task. Okay, he's in agreement there. And Dirt Devil says the UEFA Cup seems to have lost a lot of prestige recently. He says probably of how inferior it is compared to the Champions League in terms of finance and sponsorship. Maybe that's true, but I didn't see Zenit St. Petersburg complaining when they lifted the trophy against Rangers last year. Finally, Peter 1968, he says we knew at the start of the season the demands that would be placed on the team and that football is all about winning trophies. The question, of course, is whether Martin O'Neill should have gone out and brought more players to the club in the January window other than signing Emile Heskey. You have to ask yourself the question whether Curtis Davies is playing under the strain of a shoulder injury. Martin Larsson's loss, of course, is major. Carlos Cuellar came back against Chelsea when perhaps he wasn't match fit. Nigel Reo-Coker is injured at the moment but could be back for the weekend against Stoke City. Neither he nor Cuellar will apparently travel to Moscow. So there are real strains on the squad at the moment, and we're all trying to discover what sort of a team Martin will put out on Thursday ahead of those two tricky Premier League games. That's all from me, Bill Howell, for this week's Villa View. You'll be pleased to know that Matt Kendrick will be back in the chair after next Sunday's game against Stoke City. Bye for now.